Questionable Ethics, Chapter 7, Ethically Questionable. The Kieran and I, after much climbing and only minor stumbling, managed to reach the peak of the mountain. I brushed off my clothes as my boots now walked on level ground. As my hands patted down my arms and legs, I looked across the land I found myself trapped in. I saw the distant peaks of mountains that were now at eye level, that only minutes before towered above me from the valley. I watched as wispy clouds tumbled around snow-topped peaks. I saw how the trees and other alien foliage danced in the wind that barreled down from the mountain tops. It reminded me of home. Well, not home, but it reminded me of Earth. And it also reminded me of how far away from Earth I really was. Yet, I was still here, trapped in an alien world, far away from home. But most importantly, I was still breathing and alive. I thought about that for a moment. Why was I still alive and stranded here? But, as I thought about that, a part of me that didn't want to know the why and how overpowered my yearning for the answer. So, I just went back to admiring the landscape. It was humble. Beyond the mountains to the east was a vast openness, empty of any and all civilization. At the farthest reach of my view, I could only see land that stretched on for miles upon miles. Not a coastline in sight. However, the only biome I could see from where I was standing was the savanna I woke up in. It was mostly filled with flat landscape, lacking the splendor and color of the valley I was now living in. But what the savanna lacked in hills, or greenery, it made up for with breezy, amber-colored grass that gently waved in the wind, the acacia trees that danced along with them. The plains were plugged by clouds of sand and dirt that swirled about as herds of wild animals grazed and roamed freely. Something I didn't see when I was down there yesterday. Then again, I probably wasn't looking for animals while I was there. I was mostly trying to gain a sense of direction and purpose. As I look upon the savanna, I saw trees that stood alone, with only the birds perched in their branches for company, and others that were clamped together providing shade for animals that I couldn't identify. It was truly breathtaking, and almost reminded me of home in Nevada. These thoughts of home quickly forced images of Black Mesa into my mind, and I shuddered, gripping my rifle a bit harder as that thing I saw in my dreams flashed its face behind my closed eyelids. Upon shaking the image from my mind, I focused on better and brighter things like the company I had with me. "Your land is truly beautiful," I murmured as I gazed out into the vast openness of this new continent, as I gazed upon the endless expanse. Her voice behind me piped up with a chuckle. "You said that already, Adrian, but thanks again." I could hear the bashfulness in her voice. I turned around. "No. I mean this whole continent. From the mountains, your forests, to the plains. It's gorgeous. Practically all of it's untouched. No sign of the taint of civilization whatsoever," I say as I take one good last look at the land behind me before I make my way over towards Autumn, who had taken a seat in front of a medium-sized boulder. I sat atop the rock she sat in front of, my eyes falling onto the Kieran. She smiles proudly at what I said and looks over at the savanna. "I'm glad that you picked up on that. Yep, our race has, for the most part, become one with our environment. We respect it, and it respects us. We find this style of life is benefiting of a group of our size," she explained with a wide smile on her face, glowing with pride as she turned and gestured to the town below. Our way of living is based around the planet. What we take from it, we will return to it. Taking too much and changing it in ways that might affect its ability to return to the planet is considered wrong, so we try not to do that. Her smile faded into bemusement as she glanced to the ground and tapped her hoof. At least, I think that's how Rainshine put it. She only really explained it to me in great detail a couple of weeks ago, and I am still trying to understand it in my own way. I mean, every pony is taught how we should live when we're young, and in turn, we do the same to the offspring we may have. I didn't entirely understand what she meant, so I decided to probe her for some more information regarding this conversation. Pardon me for prying for info here, but in your own way, what do you mean? I asked, tilting my head to show my interest to her. Well, this doctrine was made a long time ago, and it was created by Rainshine when she became the leader of our group here in Perilous Peaks, she said as she rolled her hoof around. I nodded. And how was she elected to be your leader? How long is a long time ago? Did everyone agree with her policies at the time? I asked, rubbing the rubber of my mask. My curiosity piqued. Autumn's eyes narrowed. She scratched her head with her hoof. I can't remember how she was elected to be our leader. As far as I know, Rainshine is our leader because she just is. Nobody ever questioned it, and, I have no clue if any pony at the time agreed with what she said, but obviously they did if the rules still exist today, she said with a smile, as she came up with her answer. I couldn't tell if she was omitting certain points from her explanation, or if she genuinely didn't know much. Regardless, I nodded, and I hummed, taking in everything she said, as I was content with her explanation for now. Huh, I see. Well, that's okay, I suppose. I mean, you, Kieran, didn't hurt me when you found me, so I guess your policies taught you how to be hospitable to outsiders, which is good. As the other outcomes that could have happened between our two species would have been rather grim for both of us, I state as I ran over said scenarios in my head, all of which resulting in negative outcomes. I truly lucked out. Autumn nods her head and grins. Well, yeah, times have changed a lot in our little village, especially recently. It's been like... She taps her chin with her hoof. 400 or maybe 500 years since she became our leader. No, it's 500. I'm sure of it. And in all that time, our village hasn't changed much. But as of last year, we've matured rather quickly, she explains rather vaguely. I ran what she said by myself again, baffled at the actual or implied age of Rainshine. She was 500 years old. For a horse, she looked pretty good for her age. Wait, Rainshine is 500 years old? How is that possible? How old do you, Kieran, usually live? I said, my eyes opening wide in surprise. Her hoof returns to her chin. I don't know, she said bluntly. I mean, a normal Kieran life is about 80 years or more, depending on how fit the Kieran is, but Rainshine? I just don't know. I rolled my eyes at her selective ignorance surrounding her leader. Is there anyone that might know? I asked bluntly in return. She looked at me a bit nervously. Uh, well, besides Rainshine herself, I'm not sure any pony else can help. I'm sorry, I never really thought about this stuff until now. She muttered, rubbing her neck. I leaned in as I opened my mouth to ask her something else, but stopped myself as it was a bit rude. I quickly said something else instead, leaning back out. I didn't want to sully our early friendship so soon. How has your society here changed or matured, like you said earlier? Autumn stopped rubbing her neck and returned her gaze to the village below. She looked hesitant to tell me something. That's also kind of a hard subject for me to talk about right now. Let's just say something happened and we needed help from outsiders in order to, fix it. I mean, we didn't ask for the help, but they found us and they helped us anyway. Her mood slightly improved as she looked back at me. Since then, we've opened ourselves up to the outside. Nobody has visited us since then, but we are ready if any of them come back or some pony new shows up. Because of that, we were able to handle your arrival with as much diplomacy as we could. Autumn gave me an uneasy and nervous smile, knowing that I wanted to know more about that incident, but instead of pressing further and crossing some roads she wasn't ready for, I indulged her. Well, I think you did an excellent job given the circumstances. I put you all in. Showing up unannounced, looking the way I did. As I said, and I'm sure you will agree with, it could have gone much worse. I think you did pretty good. Her head instantly picked itself up. Her eyes widened as her face changed to that of suspenseful surprise. What? I mean, you really think I did good yesterday? Her eyes glinted at me. I nodded. Yeah, I mean, you should probably work on your presentation a bit more, but yeah, I think you did well. The moment I said this, her tail wagged from side to side as she let out a squeal. She clapped her front hooves together briefly and smiled from ear to ear. Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. You have no idea how much I needed to hear that. I thought I was a shaking, stumbling wreck yesterday. I didn't want to ask Rainshine or any pony else about it because I was afraid, but I did good? Oh, thank you. Her body gently bounced in place as she giggled with glee. Her eyes closed in excitement. After the moment passed, her whole face broke out into relief as she deflated slightly back into her seat. She cleared her throat and brushed the mane from her face. Thanks again. I smiled and gave her a bashful wave of my hand. It's nothing. I would clear my throat as if to force a new subject. So, I know we came up here to listen to me talk about my nation, where I come from, and my human way of life and all that, but what can you tell me about these rules Rainshine has put in place over your village? I asked, as I propped my rifle up on the rock I was sitting on. Autumn tapped her hoof against her chin. I don't see why not. In fact, I think it'll help us both understand each other a bit better. After all, you don't know anything about the Kieran, do you? I shook my head no. Autumn nodded and got herself comfortable in her seat. I see. Well, there are 3 basic rules that our village lives by. Autumn then went on to explain the very basic core mechanics that their small civilization lives by. For people with numbers appearing to be very small, probably no larger than 1,000, the rules they lived by were decent and simplistic, befitting of their society. Their core values were protecting the cultivation of their wildlife and themselves as living beings, the defense of their village and the life that surrounded it, and finally the pursuit of the individual to obtain freedom and happiness in life. She explained these things to me in a way that seemed as if she was reading a page out of a history book, rather than understanding them in her own way. I nod. I see. And how exactly do you apply these rules to your own life? I ask, tilting my head back slightly, waiting for a response. A response that came only after Autumn thought about my question for a few moments. I really don't think about our rules day by day. I just live my life like everybody else does. If the majority of the Kirin don't do something, then I don't do it either. They know the rules just as much as I do, and because of this, nobody really breaks the rules. We just follow them, as we think it's what's best for all of us. Nobody really questions the rules either, as there isn't really anything to question. The rules aren't harsh or intrusive in any way that I can see, nor can anyone else see. I nodded and leaned forward again. I had plenty of things I could have said on that, but I bit my tongue and kept myself quiet for now. I see. Well, I guess your system works then, right? I ask. Head tilted slightly. She nods. Yep. As far as I know, and I know quite a lot. I like to gossip a bit, an old habit of mine, she said with a genuine giggle. Now, is that all you wanted to ask? 'Cause I can answer more questions if you have more questions. Nope, that's all I wanted to ask for now, I said, reaching into my pockets to grab my little booklet, as I knew she was going to ask what she was going to ask for next. Her face lit back up as she smiled. Then, if you would like to, I guess you can read me what's inside that book. I feel there's tons I can learn from you about humans. Saying this, she pulled her notepad and feather pen out again and got ready to write. I retrieved the booklet and opened it back up to the first couple pages. I smiled at her eagerness to learn, especially since it was something that I was overly passionate about. Well then, let's begin with the Constitution. I began, my eyes touching down onto the first few words of the document. I cleared my throat as a sound of wind rushed around me as I started to read. I had Autumn's full attention now, eyes glued to me. Jackpot. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure diplomatic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. And thus, I read the whole thing from first paragraph to last word. I spoke the ancient words of the U.S. Constitution like they were words from a holy Bible. And when that was done, I told her to take the words that I had just relayed to her and let them roll around in her mind. I wanted to let the Constitution sink into her brain. I wanted to get it stuck in there, in her mind, so that the only thing she could think about were the words I had spoken. I had told her to take the notes she had written, for she was writing the entire time, and really look them over to make sure she got everything down, to make sure it was right. Afterwards, we talked for a little while longer about the things I had said. I answered the last of her questions and clarified anything she wasn't sure about. When this was all over, she said she nodded to go and talk to Rainshine about how I was, what I had told her, and that I was a good person, that I truly meant no harm to anyone in the village. So, we parted ways. As she headed back down the mountain, I, however, stayed atop the peak for a while, just looking out into the vast wilderness. It was peaceful, tranquil, and it kept my mind from wandering back to my nightmares in Black Mesa. I took the scant opportunity and meditated, now with nobody's company but my own. The rest of the day was spent scouting around the local wilderness, while avoiding town as much as possible, keeping my presence as low as I could, to do the rest of the clearing, as I could to the rest of the clearing. When I was content with my exploration of the landscape, I made my way back down from the mountain peak and returned to my campsite. In my tent, there, I sat on my rock by myself, listening to nature till the sun disappeared and darkness came again. I didn't want to go back to sleep. In fact, I was dreading it all afternoon, as I sat there seemingly motionless on my rock. But I needed sleep. I couldn't just go without it. So, my fire died again. I crawled back into my tent, removed my armor, and turned in for the night. However, that night, I didn't dream. In fact, the moment I laid my head down was the moment I woke up. I awoke feeling rested and alert. I didn't know what to think of it at the moment, so I just ignored it as best as I could. I read a passage from the Bible and went on with my morning. The second day rolled around, and much like yesterday, Autumn came to see me again in the early hours. And as she had a whole new slew of questions for me, they were mostly about the U.S. Constitution, and in turn, I had more questions to be had about interpreting Rainshine's rules and what they meant for the Kieran village as a whole. We walked and talked, and we climbed again to the top of the mountain. This time, I read the Declaration of Independence. I read the whole thing from start to finish. I even explained who all the people that wrote their names at the bottom of the paper were. I explained who they were and what they did in the most unbiased and fact-filled way possible. I explained what their significance was in the liberation of our country. I also explained how we honored those people in modern times. Once more, she hung on to every word I spoke, and as she wrote down everything that was important to her, she was really invested in her job. If she cared this much about understanding human culture and how we govern ourselves, perhaps she wanted to find a better way for the Kieran to govern themselves. Who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. But even if I'm wrong, I could definitely see the cogs in her head spinning as she listened to my lectures. Once we were done yet again, and we parted ways, she climbed down the mountain, I meditated and went scouting. When I turned in for the night, after staying by the fire and eating a little bit more of my first strike ration, I wasn't as scared as I was the night before. I figured I would fall asleep again like I did the prior night and wake up bright and early, which is exactly what happened. I woke up the moment I put my head down, as if I was eager to get up and get moving. I felt the same way the night before. It was strange. I also had the strangest yearning to return to the mountaintop and get talking more. So then before, there was something about being up there that made me feel happy. Maybe it was the meditation, maybe it was the sights and sounds, maybe it was something else. God knows what it actually was. The third day rolled around. All the same things happened, just like the two previous. And as we sat atop the mountain and looked across the vast plains of the continent and down to the peaceful village below together, I read her the Bill of Rights to finish it off. This time, however, instead of sitting across from me, she sat next to me on the rock I sat on, and despite there being plenty of room on the boulder for her to have her own space, she decided to sit right next to me and proceed to look at the pages of the booklet herself as she jotted down words on her notepad. She said she wanted to see the words I was reading. She wanted to see what Earth English was like. She said that maybe one day she would be interested in learning how to write in English. I agreed to try to help her as best as I could. When the time came, also stating the fact that I wasn't a teacher, she said it was fine with a laugh that I shared with her. I explained every amendment that there was in, yet again, the most unbiased and fact-filled way possible. Explaining to her in detail how each amendment was specifically created to withstand the test of time. I explained that each one could have been left up for debate for the future generations to squabble over in many different ways by our forefathers. Ignorance, but I knew better. Our nation's founders weren't idiots. I said, woven in between the interpretation that people claims there is the unbiased rules themselves, the kinds of rules that don't lean and bend with time, the ones that last forever. And yet again, despite her ability to keep her head aloft while reading the words on the page I held, she found it necessary to rest her chin on my shoulder as her eyes darted from side to side over each sentence on the page. To be fairly honest, it was kind of cute. The way she hung on every word, the way she laughed at all my jokes, the way she always had a decent question to ask. Of course, I would never admit this to her at any point. In fact, all of the Karen were adorable. They all looked huggable, but Autumn was more than physically adorable. Her curiosity was funny to me. For some reason, having someone like her listen to me jabber on felt good. I guess it was why I liked coming up here. Huh. Maybe I should have been a teacher. Well, there was that. Ooh. Yeah. I have, might be a little bit interesting to get another chapter of questionable ethics out, and so I did. And so it is a romance comedy, so I wonder where the romance part takes place. If so, I feel like it takes place between Adrian and Autumn. At least I hope so, because it is. I feel like it's going places. It just seems like it is. So, yeah, it is what it is. I hope you guys enjoy this chapter. Leave a comment, I guess. I'll check it out, maybe respond to it, or I'll at least try to. And stay golden. Have a good afternoon or good night.